What is going on, Bucs fans, NCFP fans? Evan Wanish here, back at you with yet another video talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Today, we are going to be continuing our positional group previews for the 2024 season. So far, we've knocked out quarterbacks and running backs. You can go check them out on the Cannon Fire Podcast YouTube channel right after you watch this one. But today, we are going to be discussing the wide receiver room, arguably still the strongest room on the entire football team, right? I still think it's got a good chance to be the best room that the Bucs have. And there's a lot of names here. There's a lot of wide receivers that the Bucs currently have on their roster. You obviously know the basics, right? Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, even guys like Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan, the rookie, third-round pick. Bucs really like him. There are also some returning faces who may be given a bigger shot this year, like Raheem Jarrett, Cephas Johnson, perhaps. But then we do have a lot of guys here like Ryan Miller, who are sort of camp bodies, guys who maybe could be special teams players. Cody Thompson was a guy that they signed from the Seattle Seahawks. Raleigh Webb is a guy that they signed this past offseason. Tanner New, undrafted free agent. Latrell Jones, also an undrafted free agent. And Cameron Johnson, undrafted free agent. And if I had made this video about 2 weeks ago, I probably wouldn't have mentioned his name, but Sterling Shepard is also a part of this wide receiver room. And again, it is something to where it's a pretty stacked room, right? When you have Sterling Shepard as probably your 4 or maybe even 5th wide receiver, that's a good problem to have for the Buccaneers. So let's break it down right now. I'm not going to go over Mike Evans, Chris Godwin too much. We all know about them. We know what they bring to the table. I wanted to start the discussion at that third wide receiver, because I think that's where things get interesting. Trey Palmer had a good rookie season, right? Being a 6th-round pick out of Nebraska, had a great rookie season, for a 6th-round pick, especially after Russell Gage went down with injury in the preseason. Trey Palmer had to play the entire season in a role he probably wasn't expecting to, and he did very well. I mean, was he perfect? No, but he did pretty well. Then the Bucs went out and they drafted Jalen McMillan in the 3rd round, 92nd overall. Jalen McMillan out of Washington. A guy who a lot of people like, I really like as well. And that to me is interesting. This is where you start to see what's going to be that competition, right, for the 3rd wide receiver role. Is Sterling Shepard going to be in there? Because they signed him a few weeks ago, right? Is Sterling Shepard going to be in that mix? Or is this going to be strictly between Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan? Who is the edge right now? We really don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, that's something that's probably going to be decided during training camp, during the preseason games. That's when you're going to have to figure that out. But I think it's going to be an interesting battle. Either way, I think the Bucs would have a talented player in the 3rd wide receiver role, and it just slides them down, right? That means wide receiver 4 is a really good wide receiver 4, and then wide receiver 5, and so on and so on, So I do think it's, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's a good problem to have. I like Palmer's skill set. I was a big fan of the Trey Palmer pick last draft. I believe I might have said that was my favorite pick that year. Jalen McMillan, really, really good pick too. I joke on the podcast all the time that the Buccaneers just pick wide receivers that I tend to really like. And the Bucs have, again, struck that chord once again with Jalen McMillan. He's a good player. He's going to be a good player. Will he be a good player instantly, though? I think that's the question. And I think if the Buccaneers figure out that, hey, this guy may need a little bit of seasoning, then I think you're going to see Trey Palmer as the team's wide receiver 3 start week 1. And I do actually believe that that's probably the most likely scenario. But the good news for Jalen McMillan, I think this dude's just too good. And I think by the time midseason rolls around, if the Bucs offense, let's say it's struggling a little bit, or Trey Palmer struggling a little bit, I think Jalen McMillan is going to earn more snaps. And I think he's going to be able to find his way into this offense more often. And he could very well be the wide receiver 3 to end the season. As far as Sterling Shepard, I know there's a lot of people, excited. It's a notable name. He hasn't really been that great for the Giants the last 2 seasons, but, it is always good depth and good veteran depth, great veteran depth, really. I mean, like I said, to have him as potentially a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, that's really good. And I do think Sterling Shepard could play a role in this team, especially with, yes, you have Mike Evans, just have Chris Godwin, but there's also a lot of young guys here. I mentioned a bunch of undrafted rookies there. Trey Palmer's in his 2nd year. Jalen McMillan's a rookie. Raheem Jarrett's in his 2nd year. Cody Thompson's in his 2nd year. They can learn a lot from Sterling Shepard here. So I do think that adding Shepard, it does make a difference. I don't think it changes the wide receiver 3 conversation, but I do think it has a trickle down effect. Maybe a guy like Raheem Jarrett, right, who had a pretty good camp last year. Was pretty good in training camp last year. Had a decent preseason. Got some playing time in the regular season, not much, mostly on special teams, and that may be where he has to make his mark, sort of in training camp. So I am curious to see that. As undrafted free agents go, there's a lot of guys that could end up on the practice squad. Guys like Cephas Johnson was on the practice squad last year. Cameron Johnson, Latrell Jones. Ryan Miller, you got Cody Thompson again, who, like I said, the Bucs just signed. You have a lot of guys here that could fill out the roster, fill out the practice squad a little bit. But let's say they do, have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan, Sterling Shepard, and Raheem Jarrett. That's 6 wide receivers. I wouldn't expect them to keep much more. I think 6 is probably the max number here. So I think a lot of those other guys that I mentioned as the undrafted free agents and stuff, I think they would probably be on the outside looking in. But who knows? There could always be a guy that pops out and makes some plays and really forces the Buccaneers' hand, right? So we will see what happens. But I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on the wide receiver room. What do you think about Mike Evans, Chris Godwin as a duo, right? Where do they rank in the NFL as a duo? I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Who do you think is going to win the wide receiver 3 competition presumably between Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan? Do you like the Sterling Shepard signing? Do you think there's any of these undrafted free agents that could potentially make a surprise impact for the Buccaneers? So always curious to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and go Bucs.